The husband had a devoted and capable female executive by his side. From the youthful bloom of her 20s to the maturity of her 30s, she had accompanied Marcel in conquering the business world. Yet she remained unmarried. As for me, I stayed home early on, focusing on our daughter's studies, never interfering. Friends voiced their indignation. Laura already sees herself as the second lady boss, and you can still sit there calmly? I smiled and said, what's there to be afraid of? This was nothing more than a low-cost way of controlling one's subordinates. There's even an online term that describes it precisely and aptly. It's called sexual conquest and incorporation. Chapter 1. While Marcel was out at sea leading a company retreat, I had just finished dinner at home with my daughter. My best friend Aurelia's message notifications buzzed incessantly. Dozens of photos poured in. A phone call followed immediately, with the muffled sound of waves hitting the hole in the background. Her voice carried fire. Elena, why didn't you come to the retreat? That Laura is practically glued to old Chan already. Aurelia's husband was a business partner, and this retreat was organized jointly by both companies. As for the photos, I had already seen them on Laura's WeChat posts. One was particularly striking. On the deck, under the vast open sky and sea, Laura wore a translucent, fresh yellow bikini, minimal fabric, perfectly tracing the curves she'd prided herself on. She clutched Marcel Chan's arm tightly, while Marcel encircled her waist. Their skin pressed together. She held up champagne, smiling dazzlingly and boldly. In almost every photo, she and Marcel stood firmly at center stage, her posture unmistakably that of a hostess. She hadn't even bothered to hide it with selective posting or setting it visible to me alone. Thus, the comment section was filled with flattery and blessings, all neatly laid out for me to see as well. Yet beneath this brazen, almost provocative photo, she carefully chose a few comments, recognized Lady Boss perfect match, to reply with feigned modesty. Oh, don't say that. As if hinting, Elena must be fuming by now. While they sipped champagne in the sea breeze, I faced the nanny's sudden leave. Some chores I had to handle personally. I was peeling an orange for my daughter Daisy's after-dinner snack, the juice spraying out, seeping into the seams of my nails with a sharp tang. At that very moment, a new message from Laura popped up at the top of my screen. Chapter 2. She sent me 2 photos. One was a close-up, the other, a screenshot of the comments under her WeChat post, clearly afraid I might miss it. She still feigned an explanation. Elena, the sea breeze was too strong. President Chan was just holding me so I wouldn't lose my balance. Don't overthink it. After I saw the photos, Marcel himself also sent a message, giving me the exact same excuse. I smiled faintly and replied, it's fine. Stay safe. Popping a slice of orange into my mouth, I answered Aurelia flatly, before Daisy goes to college, I won't involve myself in company matters. She shrilled in indignation on my behalf. Not involve yourself? She's already putting on the airs of being the second lady boss. She used to be just your assistant. Now she's climbing right onto your husband's pillow. And you're still sitting still? She had just returned from abroad, so some things were still unclear to her. For instance, Laura's relationship with Marcel had already lasted more than 10 years. I let out a soft laugh. Aurelia, exasperated, snapped, you're laughing? She doesn't even see you in her eyes. Elena! She wasn't wrong. Laura's attitude toward me had traced out a visible parabola, from the awe she held when she first joined the company as my assistant, to the probing when she took over my duties after I went home during pregnancy, to the level gaze after she followed Marcel through a few major projects. Finally, during my pregnancy, when my father passed away and Marcel seized full power, came her undisguised dismissal of me, like that of a victor. I wiped my hands, set the phone on the kitchen counter, and went on slicing the apple in front of me. Aurelia, tell me, what is the most efficient, lowest cost reward for a loyal and highly capable subordinate? A promotion? A raise? Equity? No, I said softly. It's giving her favoritism, making her feel special. So she willingly devotes everything to you, and even believes she's the one taking advantage. Silence fell on the other end. I slowly dried my hands, carried the sliced fruit into Daisy's study, set it beside her as she worked on homework, closed the door, and continued. All of this, I permitted. Because from the perspective of corporate management, this is the lowest cost way to keep subordinates under control. It's just that Marcel has always believed that he's the one in control. Chapter 3. I never thought I could one day marry Marcel, for no reason other than simply not daring to imagine it. As teenagers, we attended the same international high school, but the difference between our family fortunes was immeasurable. I can still remember, at the Chon family's peak, in the most expensive district of H City, the private driveway in front of their villa took 8 minutes just to drive through, and their garden was more than 10 times the size of ours, complete with blue peacocks raised inside. Celebrities and politicians came and went. My parents had to pull strings through multiple connections just to get an invitation to a Chon family banquet. Marcel shone so dazzlingly, while I was nothing more than background scenery among his classmates. But glory never lasts. In our second year of high school, a policy crackdown brought scrutiny on their industry. The Chon family's real estate assets were seized overnight. An old President Chon went to prison. Former friends and connections scattered like birds. Soon after, Marcel's mother also passed away in depression. At the time, everyone avoided him like the plague. I sold the Kelly doll bag my aunt had given me for my 18th birthday, raised 300,000 yuan to pay his study abroad tuition. He was stunned. I smiled and told him, I applied to the same university as you. We'll still be classmates, which means I can still help you. But for a teenage boy, pride was larger than the sky. With red eyes and a stiff neck, he said, I'll pay you back. Later, he pieced together other small loans, and somehow managed to work part-time while finishing university. And he still found time to date me. By graduation, he had indeed saved up the 300,000, plus interest, and returned it to me. Unfortunately, once the debt was paid, Marcel had nothing left. But he knew he wanted to marry me. Naturally, my parents disapproved. But Marcel was clever. Though his family had fallen, the tastes and knowledge shaped by a privileged upbringing remained. He could appreciate wine, play golf, was courteous in daily life, and shrewd in business. At dinners and card tables, he secured several major clients for my father's company. Eventually, my father relented and allowed us to marry, though he still refused to cede control. Even as illness overtook him, the company's reins remained in my hands. He treated Marcel like a capable tenant farmer. Nevermore. The turning point came when I became pregnant. Chapter 4. My father's health declined steadily, and the uncles in the Su family cast covetous eyes on our business empire. I suffered severe pregnancy sickness, drained of energy, and had no choice but to gradually hand core projects over to Marcel. Marcel's business acumen seemed innate. Several projects under his lead brought the company unprecedented breakthroughs in profit. But the more outstanding he became, the more anxious my father grew. He wanted a safeguard, a guarantee that Marcel would never be able to shake the foundation of the Su family. Thus, after our daughter Daisy was born, Marcel voluntarily proposed that she take my surname, Su. This had been my father's preset condition, the price of exchange. I still remember it clearly. In the hospital, Marcel held the newborn in his arms, and said to me lying on the bed, in his eyes were humiliation and ambition, but the clarity of youth was gone. Pale-faced, he told me, Elena, I've done this much for you and the Su family, your father should be at peace now. I understood then, a man stripped of the right to pass down his surname would seek compensation elsewhere. For example, more money, and more women. I granted him power, allowed him to cultivate his own confidence. And Laura, she was the one he personally promoted from assistant after that, until the year my father passed away. When Daisy was 7, from the moment my father closed his eyes, a certain balance was broken completely. Marcel's era began, or rather, what he believed to be his era. In the years since, I stepped into the background, under the guise of being a dutiful wife and mother, when in fact, I simply observed in silence. I watched Marcel wield sweeping reforms, and push Laura step by step into the position of director. Laura was indeed capable. She was like a sword forged for Marcel, striking wherever he pointed. Invincible, she secured key domestic and international deals. Decisive in negotiations, dazzling in social banquets, she became his most trusted arm, his most synchronized comrade, and his most intimate lover. Everyone in the company knew. Except me, at least in appearance. I, Elena Sue, the mistress of the Sue family, like porcelain sealed in old times, displayed at home, untouched and ignored. Aurelia's phone call merely pierced a veil everyone else had long seen through. Over the years, every unusual financial flow and each abnormal personnel shift had been delivered, encrypted, to my private inbox. On time each week, I hung up the phone and glanced at Daisy's focused figure in the study. Her high school years were coming to an end, which also meant Elena's era was about to return. Chapter 5. Shortly after Daisy graduated high school, the company marked its 30th anniversary. Having withdrawn into family life for many years, I was already out of practice with corporate affairs. But on the night of the banquet, I decided to attend. The moment I stepped into the ballroom with Marcel on my arm, I knew tonight belonged to Laura. I wore a champagne gold custom gown, gentle and distant. Laura, on the other hand, was in a midnight blue dress, perfectly echoing the shade of Marcel's tie. As if they were the pair deliberately matched. President Chan, Chairman Ma, they've been waiting a long time. She handed Marcel a glass of wine with practiced ease. Almost erasing my presence, he patted my hand in reassurance, took the glass, and hurriedly excused himself. Find a place to sit for a while. I'll go say hello. Then, led by Laura, he melted into the glittering crowd. I was left standing alone. Before long, whispers surged around me like a tide, unrestrained. That's President Chan's wife? She doesn't seem to have the same presence as Director Dai at all. Shoo, keep your voice down. But honestly, just look at Director Dai and President Chan standing together. That's what they call a perfect couple. A power match. Right. I heard she's been a housewife for years. Even knowing President Chan likes Director Dai, she doesn't dare make a fuss. Nonsense. At least half this empire was built by Director Dai alongside President Chan over 30 years. If I were a man, I'd choose Director Dai too. I held a faint smile, as if I hadn't heard a thing. Before long, a girl wearing an intern badge came over, holding a wine glass, eyes burning with adoration as she headed straight for Laura. But she was momentarily blocked by a passing guest, and her gaze fell on me instead, her brows furrowing. Good evening, madam. Her tone carried a faint, condescending scrutiny. This is the area reserved for the main table guests. To avoid disturbing Director Dai and the important guests, outsiders really shouldn't linger here. After speaking, she deliberately lifted her chin toward Laura. The eagerness to curry favor couldn't have been more obvious. Laura saw the scene, her smile deepening. Yet she made no move to rescue me. All around, people waited to watch me make a fool of myself. Before I could speak, Marcel's assistant rushed over, saying sternly, "Mary, this is President Chan's wife, Mrs. Sue." Chapter 6. The intern turned pale and immediately bowed in apology. Marcel turned to look at me, signaling that he was aware and handling it. But if not for the fact that for over a decade he had deliberately avoided mentioning family or marriage in interviews, if not for his intentional elevation of Laura's presence within the company, how else could I have been looked down upon like this? He walked straight to the main table, pulled out the chair beside him, and gestured for me to sit. Only then did I notice how strangely the seating was arranged. Marcel in the main seat, with Laura and me flanking him on either side, forming a triangle that was both solid and unbearably awkward. He smoothly unbuttoned his jacket and added, unnaturally, "Don't overthink it, Laura always shields me from drinks, so she sits next to me out of habit." Then came the speeches. Laura, as a company veteran, took the lead. She lifted her glass toward the crowd, but her eyes locked only on Marcel's face. In the past decade, I've devoted all my youth and passion to this company. The person I most want to thank is President Chan. Her voice choked slightly, weighted with endless affection. Thank you for sheltering me from the storms and giving me a vast world to grow in. All these years, the company has been my home, and President Chan, my family. The word family, she bit down heavily. And then, like spotlights, all eyes swung toward me. Chapter 7. That was when I finally lifted my gaze, smiling as I said, "Director Dai spoke so well. Marcel and I have always regarded you as family too." I paused, then turned the knife with a deeper smile. "Just like how our whole family adores Tang Yuan." Over time, feelings do grow, don't they? Laura's cheeks flushed as she asked curiously. Tang Yuan? Which department is that from? Marcel's assistant murmured softly. Tang Yuan is the ragdoll cat President Chan and Madame Su adopted. The blood drained instantly from Laura's face. I raised my glass, touching hers lightly. When we first brought her back, she was pitifully thin, always rubbing against people for food. Now her coat is glossy, her body plump, and sometimes she even scratches the sofa. Thinking she's the owner, the air froze. Guests who had been whispering moments ago now wore expressions both amused and restrained, eager to laugh but holding back. Marcel snapped his head toward me, his voice uncharacteristically cold. Elena, must you embarrass her in such a setting? I leaned close, playing the loving wife, and whispered each word into his ear. You know this, our daughter has graduated high school. Or, has your decade of glory already made you forget? Is the company's surname Chan or Su? Cut off point. I had never spoken harshly to him before. This was the first time. He was stunned by my bluntness. 4 years, I had preserved the illusion, for Daisy's sake, so she could have a harmonious home and keep her father's halo intact. And for Marcel's sake, so he would believe my retreat into family life was genuine, motivating him to work harder. I had never pierced the mirage he built, brick by brick, over more than a decade. Now, with just a light jab, Marcel froze, his face ashen, asking, You, what do you mean by that? Nothing. Don't be nervous. I raised my voice. It's just that tonight I'd like to announce, next week, I will officially return to the company. I hope all of you here will lend me your support. Chapter 8. The moment my words fell, the entire hall fell silent. Laura froze completely, as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over her head. A week later, I parachuted into the company. My position, vice president, a title that sounded powerful, but in reality was ornamental. My responsibilities were corporate culture, employee relations, and partial auditing. My father's old subordinates treated me with reverence. Those under Marcel's command kept a polite distance. On the surface, all was harmony, the years serene, but this lukewarm peace, this frog-boiled-in-water calm, was not what I wanted. So, I used the excuse of our daughter soon going abroad, saying I wished for her to enjoy these last few months of complete family time. It was a reason Marcel couldn't refuse. I went to and from work with him, riding in his car in the mornings, waiting to leave with him in the evenings, even when he worked late. I had the secretary order dinner, and sat quietly on the sofa in his office, reading documents while keeping him company. Laura no longer had any gaps to slip herself into. Years ago, when Laura was making waves by leading projects, she became something of a rising star. At that time, I often saw clips of her interviews circulating, where she was asked about marriage, rather than being someone's wife. I prefer being my own queen. Using the womb as a bargaining chip is the saddest fate for a woman. My sense of security comes only from the number of digits in my bank account, not from a man's promises. Those interview snippets were clipped into short videos, going viral across social media. Under her golden quotes piled endless praise and fervent support. She speaks for us online. This is how we strong women should live. Director Dai is my spiritual mentor. This is the ultimate alpha female energy, expansive, liberating. Director Dai is stunning. No wonder President Chan praises her in every interview. Who wouldn't be enchanted? Don't talk nonsense. President Chan has a wife, though. Word is she's long since retreated to the family. Looks like the official wife's position won't last much longer anyway. For a while, Laura was untouchable, her words treated as gospel by countless women genuinely pursuing independent careers. In time, netizens stopped calling her by name, instead crowning her with a heavy title, the textbook alpha heroine. But in these recent days, in the pantry or hallways, I often glimpsed the face of this so-called alpha heroine, twisted faintly by jealousy and resentment. It seemed she could no longer hold herself back. A few days later, some thorny projects landed on my desk. Marcel's intention behind the arrangement was obvious. Only if I was busy would Laura have chances to be alone with him. By handing me the difficult projects, Marcel hoped to see me retreat in defeat. But for me, this was only the beginning. Chapter 9. One project required an off-site meeting, forcing me to lead a team on a business trip to Ningxing. When I went to Marcel for the travel approval, Laura was there too. He looked up, his usually gentle face tinged with concern. "This project, are you sure it's fine to go alone?" Before I could reply, Laura let out a soft laugh, leaning casually against the desk. Her tone feigned concern. "Elena, why put yourself through such hardship? President Chan certainly can afford to support you." She had once witnessed my sharp edge in the corporate world, but inflated for too long. She now seemed convinced that after so many years at home, I had become a woman living off Marcel. I didn't look at her. I only smiled faintly. Of course Marcel can provide, but personally, I prefer providing for myself. I paused, then said each word clearly. As Director Dai once put it, meals you stretch out your hand to beg for never taste as solid as the ones you earn yourself. Laura was struck silent. Seeing her rebuttal fail, Marcel finally went ahead and signed the approval. That evening after dinner, my daughter clung to my arm, whispering, "Mom, how long will you be away on this trip?" 3 days. She let out a sigh of relief. "Good. I thought it was 3 months, then you'd miss my enrollment." I laughed, tapping her nose. "How could I miss that? For your enrollment, I'll even give you a special gift." "What gift?" I ruffled her hair. "You'll know when the time comes." Chapter 10. To facilitate communication with the client, I stayed at the J Hotel, where the other company's executives were also lodged. I chose this project as my entry point because the person in charge was an old acquaintance. The negotiations went smoother than expected. Even while still on the return flight, some fence-sitters had already sent me congratulatory messages dressed as long essays. Back at the company, after I handed the 12,000 yuan hotel invoice to the finance department, Tom, the new hire in finance, uncharacteristically knocked on my office door twice. Looking troubled, he said, "Chairwoman Su, a new regulation just came down to control costs. All executives' travel accommodations can't exceed 3,000 yuan per night." I glanced at the scorching hot invoice in his hand, and instantly understood. This was Laura testing the waters. I didn't respond, only gave a small nod. Seeing I wasn't angry, Tom grew even more nervous. He lowered his voice. "Director Dai said the company has to treat everyone equally. Rules are rules. She hopes you'll understand." "Don't worry. I understand." I finally spoke, my tone calm and even. I drew out a stack of cash and pushed it across with the invoice. "Reimburse according to regulations. I'll cover the rest myself." "Sorry this put you in a difficult spot." Tom froze, clearly not expecting a task he dreaded so much to go so smoothly. I lifted my coffee, leisurely blew away the steam, my gaze warm. Young people in the workplace often have no choice but to take on unpleasant tasks. "I can understand. Go and report back." When I looked up again, gratitude glimmered in Tom's eyes. Thank you, Chairwoman Su." He almost fled the office. Yet the gratitude in his words was genuine. Laura had tried to target me with this new rule, but in the finance department, there were directors, managers, supervisors. In the end, this tiny matter had been pushed all the way down, until they sent in an intern to take the hit. I had thought that after over 10 years in the company, Laura's people would be fiercely loyal. Now I saw nothing of the sort. In such a critical department, morale was unstable. 4,000 yuan had just bought me an opening move so foul it stank. A bargain. Really. Chapter 11. I thought Laura might still have new tricks, but it turned out that after tasting the sweetness last time, she became obsessed with using the reimbursement system to trip me up. Later I figured it out. It wasn't that she had no other methods. It was that, as CFO, she knew this system intimately, and delighted in playing within her comfort zone, using petty rules to needle me. So far, I had secured 3 projects, traveled 3 times. Altogether, including advances and reimbursements I covered myself, the total was nearing 100,000 yuan. That was enough. I decided it was time to return the favor. Chapter 12. Last week, I overspent the advance given for entertaining a client. Among the reimbursement documents I submitted, there were a few informal receipts. Sure enough, half a month passed, and no reimbursement came through. That afternoon, when most people were around, I went straight to the finance office. The manager in charge was surnamed Song. His face unfamiliar. I didn't hesitate. Cutting straight to the point. Manager Song. My reimbursement for the Korea trip, less than 50,000 yuan, has been held up for almost a month. He froze, then forced a smile and tried to deflect. I'm quite busy here. So am I interrupted. But surely, it makes no sense for me to be making money for the company while footing the bill myself. Does it? We've no personal grudges between us. Have we? Or is Manager Song taking out someone else's anger on me? I asked plainly, my gaze crystal clear. Song immediately stiffened, looking like he had much to say but couldn't. No, of course not. The finance office fell silent. No one looked up, but every ear was perked. Moments later, Laura arrived, heels clicking, draped in an Hermes shawl, arms crossed, her posture serene. No doubt she'd been waiting for this. Holding my receipts, her smile was edged with blades. Chairwoman Su must be out of practice after so long. No headers, no stamps. How can finance verify authenticity? Impossible to book them. Her words instantly painted me as unreasonable. Yet before the hospitality, no one had told me this. The rules clearly stated that overseas entertainment expenses could be paid in cash. And in special cases, a limited amount of informal receipts were acceptable. She met my gaze. Well, as you said, that was before. The system was changed during the week you were away. It's been through the board already. She deliberately slowed her speech. Now, without formal receipts, authenticity can't be confirmed. That's final. I countered. So what, you mean to prove authenticity? I should have registered a company for the roast pig chef on the spot. And had a stamp carved? Even slander should have its limits, shouldn't it? Laura tilted her head, laughing mockingly near my ear, then whispered, Chairwoman Su, why struggle? Those framing you always know exactly how wronged you are. I turned the blade back. Oh, and this isn't like when everyone was desperate for me to land the project? She chuckled as if I'd told a joke. Chairwoman Su, that was the company giving you an opportunity. If you don't want it, there are plenty of others who do. Exactly the line I was waiting for. Good. I straightened, looking at her. Then find one of those willing people. The Korea project bids next week. All the documents are with me. Laura's face drained of color. At last, she realized the non-compliant receipts had been a deliberate lure I had set. Her eyes darted around, finally registering why I had come to finance, not her office. Now, many eyes were fixed on the spectacle. After a pause, she tried to backpedal. This is different. How different? You just said it yourself. The project doesn't need me. Fine, I'll forego the reimbursement. Consider it my treat to all shareholders. As for the Korean client and the project, please, find someone else. With that, I turned and left. Chapter 13. The reason the Korea project had stalled for so many years wasn't anything mysterious. It was simply because my father's death had blocked the renewal of cooperation. The project's total was in the 9-figure range. If Marcel dared claim he didn't want such a piece of fat meat, the old shareholders would drown him in spit the very next day. Over the years, many had tried and failed, including Marcel himself. A few years ago, Laura had even camped out in Korea for a month with a team, yet never managed to meet the project head. When I sealed the deal, the shareholders were naturally delighted. But with Laura's prideful nature, her imbalance must have been festering. I returned to my office, reclining comfortably in my chair, waiting for the next move. It wasn't long before Marcel walked in. I didn't even look up, just kept typing coldly at my computer. Busy, I said flatly. What are you busy with? He asked, smiling. Minesweeper. Oh, since when does Minesweeper need a keyboard? His tone carried teasing. Aw, I was too happy, got carried away. I should have clicked the mouse. Marcel chuckled. Chairwoman Su, if you're free, may I have the honor of a chat? I stopped, looked at him. What is it you want to talk about? He took my hand, rubbing it gently. Laura came to me, crying her heart out. Over a few tens of thousands of yuan. Really? Making her suffer in finance like that, how can she hold her head up in front of subordinates after this? I pulled my hand away, drew a wet wipe, and carefully cleaned each finger. My face cold. So that's how you calculate things? And is this really the point of why you came here? Clearly, it was the project he was after. Marcel pressed his hands together in mock supplication. My fault. My fault. Let's have you continue with the Korea project then. As for the reimbursement, 3 days, no, 2 days. It will be in your account. Satisfied? Fine, but Laura has to apologize to me. Chapter 14. I got what I wanted, Laura's apology. The Korea project was also a sweeping success. With it, I won over a crowd of supporters, including some directors and shareholders who had once doubted me. At the celebration banquet, Marcel was beaming with pride. After a few rounds of drinks, he pulled me aside. Last time, Laura suffered some grievances, but she did it for the good of the company, he said, his words carrying another meaning. The follow-up work for the Korea project will be heavy. Laura has experience. Why not let her join the project team? Help share some of the burden? I swirled the wine in my glass, the crimson liquid tracing an arc against the rim. My project team, since when did it need her to share the burden? Chairwoman Sue, broaden your perspective a little. Marcel patted my shoulder. We're all doing it for the company. Adding another name to the credit sheet looks good, doesn't it? In plain terms, he wanted to pick peaches, give Laura half the credit for the Korea project, soothing her emotions, and balancing out my rising influence in the company. Beyond the matter of their relationship, the only reason he would care this much about Laura's feelings was simple. She had leverage on him. Then, I should start with her. I gave a cold laugh, slamming the glass down heavily. She can join, but all decisions must be mine alone. She can listen, she can act, but she cannot have opinions. Marcel's smile instantly returned. Of course, of course. Chapter 15. 3 days later, Laura quickly moved into the Korea project office. Such efficiency in high-level personnel appointments. One had to admit, both Marcel and Laura now wielded considerable power. She strutted around the workspace like a hostess inspecting her estate. Chin lifted, eyes brimming with smug pride. I ignored her displays of triumph. A week later, at the group's strategy meeting, I threw out a brand new proposal, the full-scale bidding for the West City Science Innovation Park. It was a golden prize. Whoever secured it would be crowned this year's performance champion. All eyes lit up. I turned to Laura, smiling. Director Dai, with your outstanding abilities, this new project will be entirely in your hands. Her smile froze. What she wanted was to snatch credit from the Korea project's completion. This was beyond her expectations. We weren't yet at the stage of politely handing over a piece of fat meat already between our teeth. She hesitated, unsure of what medicine I was selling in my gourd. But with everyone watching, I had given her the high hat. She had no choice but to smile and accept. All right, thank you, Chairwoman Sue, for your trust. She gritted her teeth as she said it. She thought I merely wanted to push her out of the Korea project. She didn't know, the real show was only just beginning. Chapter 16. The Science Innovation Park project, which Laura had been certain to win, slipped through her fingers. The reason, another company submitted a higher bid. That alone wasn't unusual, but their offer exceeded ours by only 0.3%. The margin was so slight, so precise. It pointed to one conclusion: our bidding information had likely been leaked. The prime suspect? Laura. And what was she thinking as she sat there? Probably, I didn't do it. But she also knew, the proposal figures were known only to herself and Marcel. And she knew, too, that in this hollowed-out marriage, Marcel and I were locked in a struggle for control. Her bond with him was nearly unbreakable. He would never cripple himself at a critical moment. She turned to Marcel for reassurance, but his eyes did not return the same. What awaited her were questions from the board and from auditors. Oh, and I'd also brought in 2 professional lawyers. Once the audit manager finished the procedural inquiries, one lawyer asked clearly, Miss Laura, have you recently had any private contact with personnel from the competitor's company? Laura began to tense, fists clenched, ready to deny, but then she lifted her eyes, meeting my calm smile across the table. Arms folded, and she understood. She realized why I had so generously handed her this project. Why her ex-boyfriend, now working in the competitor's team, had suddenly resurfaced. Why Pablo had grasped her hand, telling her he could soon afford a house, begging her to take him back. Yes, Pablo could afford one now. The price was her future. A week before bidding began, I had Aurelia find Pablo. The man had believed Laura left him years ago because he couldn't buy property in H City. Aurelia showed him Laura's real estate portfolio. One purchase was even dated while they were still together. Pablo, shaken, went to confront Laura. That encounter buried her. Laura finally lifted her gaze to mine, and after a long silence, spoke calmly. Yes. A ripple of unrest spread through the room. I curved my lips upward. She was smart enough to know, once I'd acted, I'd have already prepared everything. Her only option was to concede. She made one last attempt. I did meet Mr. Nya from the competitor's project team, but it was purely a personal meeting. Our conversation did not involve any business matters. I have never betrayed the company's interests. Understood. The lawyer confirmed. And this is your complete statement? Yes. The audit manager then announced. Given the size of this project and the complexity of the situation, you are hereby suspended. Pending investigation. Please keep your phone accessible. The company reserves the right to pursue legal action. All right. She staggered to her feet. May I leave now? All eyes turned toward Marcel. President Chan? She asked. Marcel, silent until now, nodded blankly. Chapter 17. When Marcel and I returned to his office, Laura was there. The sharp, efficient professional woman was gone, replaced by red-rimmed eyes. Strands of hair stuck messily to her face, tears making her pitiful and disheveled. The moment she saw Marcel, she lunged for him like a drowning person clinging to a lifeline, completely ignoring that I was present. I didn't do it. I don't know how the leak happened. Maybe it was just coincidence. Marcel, you believe me, don't you? Marcel was silent. Still, she tried to explain. The proposal, I kept it locked in the safe. Never left it out. Then suddenly, she turned toward me, forcing composure back into her voice. What matters now is finding out who touched the safe. Who peeked at the proposal? She wiped her tears, stepped closer, her tone turning fierce. It must have been someone with ulterior motives. I'll check the surveillance right now. I'll investigate immediately. Don't. Marcel's voice cut sharp, decisive. Laura froze in place. Her voice trembled. What? Even you don't believe I've been framed? I answered calmly. He believes you. She whipped her head around to me. I smiled faintly, lowering my voice. Because the one who framed you knows better than anyone how wronged you are. Chapter 18. That sentence, like an invisible needle, instantly punctured every intense emotion Laura had. Her cries and accusations stopped midstream. She must have remembered. Not long ago, in the finance office, she had said the very same things to me. So that was it. My silence that day hadn't been weakness, it had been bookkeeping. So today was a carefully planned ambush. Something clicked in her, and she turned to Marcel, demanding, Marcel, what does she mean by that? Say something. Marcel's silence made the most impossible answer spring to mind. Not you. Marcel, it wasn't you, right? She kept shaking his arm. The man still said nothing. Of course he couldn't speak. How could he tell Laura that? Just days earlier, after I'd told him about Laura's meeting with her ex, my lawyer had been waiting in his office with clear evidence of every transaction between the shell company he and Laura used overseas. There was even a drafted indictment accusing them of embezzlement and industrial espionage. My choice for him was simple. Either abandon the car to save the driver, walk away whole, or go down with the ship. And he and Laura would face prison. Faced with 10+ years of intimacy and the fortune at hand, he hesitated for 3 seconds and chose himself. Marcel, how could you do this? She cried. What does this gain you? Didn't you say, if you held on a few more years we could get married? Marcel lowered his eyes and sneered. Now that I knew everything, he no longer needed to hide from me. He turned it back on her without shame. If you hadn't been entangled with your ex, didn't you know, before meeting him, that he was from the competitor's project team? Of course Laura knew. She was that clever to the point of arrogance. So Pablo, to dispel her defenses, called the meeting a date to help her win the project. Laura thought Pablo pined for her. If she let him in a little, Maybe she could trim project costs further. After all, she had been CFO before this, she'd care if the company spent more. Besides, everyone knew this project was my gift to her. If she succeeded, she couldn't loudly claim credit. But if she controlled costs beyond expectations, she could at least stage a comeback against me. What she didn't expect was that the drunkard's aims weren't truly about the wine. Laura had worked so hard, had been so diligent for the company, had stayed unmarried for Marcel for years. And now, it was all ruined. Stop struggling. Marcel left after saying that. But clearly Laura had no intention of going anywhere. Chapter 19. She turned her attack on me again, her voice shrill with fury. Elena, have some shame. Pretending to be a married couple, what's the point? There's no love left between you two. Why do you still cling to the wife's seat? She stepped forward, full of resentment and venom. You were perfectly fine at home, so why come back? You must get some satisfaction messing with me. Huh? But listen, even if I leave, there will be 1,000 more like me. Marcel will never love you. I watched her until she screamed herself hoarse, then slowly shook my head and gave a smile that was almost pity. Satisfaction? Mess with you? I let out a quiet laugh, picked up the cold coffee on the table and swirled it gently. Laura, you overestimate yourself and underestimate me. My voice was soft, but it struck her like a hammer. I returned to the company simply to take back what belongs to me. You were never my target. I stood and walked up to her, meeting her gaze with calm eyes. You might not believe it, but I love talent like my father did. I gave you 12 years to shine in this company. Did you really think I didn't notice your petty trysts with Marcel? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so my breath brushed her ear. I tolerated the small scandals because you were useful. I tolerated Marcel's affairs because he was useful to the company. The profits you two generated far outweighed the little displeasure they caused me. We could have coexisted peacefully until you tried to declare sovereignty and name yourself the mistress of the house. You came at me first. I watched as her pupils shrank, then took one step back with an almost satisfied regret in my tone. So, though I hate to, I must let you go. She looked as if all her strength had been drained, yet she still held on to the last shred of dignity. Her lips moved and she spat out 2 words bluntly. You don't have to make me leave. I resign. Chapter 20. If you have that kind of resolve, all the better. I nodded, sat back down, fingers interlaced in a negotiating pose. But before you go, there's an account we need to settle. I opened a drawer and slid a file across to her. All the things Marcel has bought you over the years, and the assets you diverted from the company using your position, they should all be returned. She goggled in disbelief as if I'd spoken a fairy tale. What are you talking about? What money? I've worked diligently, earned my own, spent it honestly. Honestly? I leaned forward slightly, enunciating each word. Oh, then do you know that after my father died, the shares Marcel holds are only held on paper? Her face froze. He was the nominal major shareholder, appearing to control management. Yet in reality he only took a fixed salary each year. Judging by the shock on her face, she had no idea. A single flat in Jiangwan, H City, would take him 20 years of work to afford. Yet he'd bought you 3. Laura's color drained. Her lips trembled silently. I gave her no time to catch her breath and continued. You and your overseas channels set up a slick shell company and, over the past 3 years, transferred at least 9 figures out. She stammered, What? Calculate this for me. Does this make sense? Is this legal? You've been CFO for years. You should know better, right? She hadn't expected that the careful safety nets she and Marcel had built for their new life, the love nest and the vault, would be, to me, transparent sandcastles. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came. I added, leisurely as if remarking on the weather. Don't worry, though these are marital assets. I'm not entirely heartless. Return the big-ticket items. Jewelry or bags under 10,000 yuan can be considered my severance for your years of service. Then I fixed her with a final look. My smile gentle but my words laced with poison. And do not even think of using petty leverage to threaten him or me. You might well tangle yourself in the net. I watched the color drain from her face, inch by inch, until it became a deathly gray. Chapter 21. On the day of my daughter's coming-of-age ceremony, in front of Marcel, I formally transferred to Daisy the portion of shares that my father's will had reserved for her. At the restaurant, Daisy raised her juice, eyes crinkling with a bright smile. Thanks, Mom. I touched my glass to hers with a smile. You should thank Dad too. He's held those shares for you all these years. He worked hard. I pronounced the word Dad with particular clarity. Daisy immediately understood and turned to Marcel with a sweet smile. Thanks, Dad. Please keep managing the company well for me until I take over. Sunlight warmed her face. To outsiders, it looked like a tender, perfect little family. The ugly sight, however, was Marcel's smile. It was more miserable than tears. He forced a twitch at the corner of his mouth, put down his cutlery, and used the excuse of going to the restroom to leave. Not long after, my phone buzzed, a message from him. Come out. I rose and found him at the end of the corridor, slumped against the cold wall. The once-spirited face now wore only fragments and resignation. Laura was gone. The shares had been transferred. Management control had been reclaimed. Even his little stash had been taken away. He gave a self-mocking smile, turned to me, voice rough. Elena, give me a straight answer. What's next? Divorce? In the aftermath, I still treated him with the same courtesy and gentleness as before, the old Elena. He wasn't used to it. He looked at me, eyes shattered, helpless, a mixture of many emotions that made him appear beaten. For a moment, one couldn't help but recall the boy from the Chan family's collapse, red-eyed but refusing to bow. People flowed in the corridor. The lights blurred. Just as I was about to speak, an uninvited guest stumbled in. Laura, clutching her abdomen, tearful, rushed to Marcel as if grasping the last straw. Marcel, she announced in a trembling voice, as if making one final attempt. I'm pregnant. Marcel stared at her in disbelief. What did you say? Chapter 22. Marcel thought he had misheard. I looked at Marcel with feigned surprise, though the corner of my lips curved into an almost imperceptible smile. My voice was clear. This is the reason you want a divorce from me, husband? A flicker of joy flashed across Laura's eyes. Marcel shook his head in confusion. No, I just found out myself. I thought you wanted a divorce to raise another man's child with her. What do you mean another man's child? Marcel, this is your child. I've never been with anyone else. And you've never taken precautions. How can you deny him? Laura shook him so hard his head wobbled, leaving him speechless, unable to come up with a single excuse. I burst out laughing, shattering the absurd silence. Oh, heavens! Marcel, what's wrong with you? You didn't even tell her you had already gotten a vasectomy long ago. You let such a misunderstanding drag on, making Miss Dai go around searching for a father for her child. How pitiful is that? You truly are heartless. Yes. Back then when I gave birth to Daisy, Marcel did two things to ease my father's concerns. First, the child would take my surname. Second, he had a vasectomy, an irreversible one. Because at that time, he loved me, and he believed I loved him deeply too. The moment I finished speaking, Laura's face, full of wild hope and excitement, instantly shattered into emptiness. She swayed as if she might collapse, and all her emotions erupted into a hysterical scream. No one knew whether she was cursing him or herself. You're a complete bastard. Chapter 23. Marcel wanted a divorce. He thought that after Laura exposed all the scandals, divorce would be the final judgment I handed down to him. But he was wrong. Divorce is impossible. The freedom Marcel longs for, I cannot grant him. Divorce would mean splitting the Su family's assets. It could even shake public opinion. Besides, my father invested years in training him. It took my father a long time to carve a rough piece of jade into what Marcel is today, someone who understands every aspect of the Su family's business, who is fluent in the rules of commerce, and who can create the greatest value for the Su family. Now that this masterpiece has finally been polished to perfection, how could I possibly let go so easily? The price of his betrayal is not losing me. It is that, forever and ever, he will work for me, for my daughter, and for the Su family's only heir. He will spend the rest of his life repaying his past ambition and greed. Besides, Daisy is not yet married. My daughter is my entire devotion and future. Her life resume must be flawless. Her family background must be unshakable. I will not allow her to one day when she meets the boy she loves, be forced to explain that she comes from a broken single-parent family. I will not allow anyone to use the label of divorced parents to speculate about her character or to strike at her vulnerabilities. What I must give her is a solid, complete, and happy family. I will bear the unhappy parts for her. Her father will always be that powerful man in the business world, yet a loving and gentle father at home, Marcel. Her parents, wholly and solely, will exist only for her. Chapter 24. My mother, basking in the sun on the beaches of Bora Bora, heard about the farce and called me. I told you before, but you wouldn't listen. You insisted on choosing Marcel. If you had chosen someone from a matching family background, wouldn't none of this have happened? I looked out the window. The sunlight was perfect, the breeze soft. I smiled. Mom, life doesn't have so many ifs. After all, both Dad and I only wanted to keep the fortune in the Sue family's hands. Isn't this better? I only had to date him and give birth to a child, and he'll devote his life to serving the Sue family. There was silence on the other end of the line. I stroked the photo of my daughter on my phone and added softly, besides, men are all more or less the same. Since I had to choose one, of course I picked the most pleasing to the eye. Otherwise, how could my Daisy have such a beautiful face? Extra. Chapter 1. Time is the most sophisticated makeup artist. It can smooth the deepest wounds and also conceal the ugliest truths. 5 years have passed since that showdown that almost nailed me to the pillar of shame. In those 5 years I fell from being the controller of the company back to a high-level employee. Elena did not divorce me. She simply used a more dignified method to imprison me inside this gilded cage called family. I still live in H-City's top villa district. I still drive the newest luxury car models. The Patek Philippe on my wrist changes every year. But none of those things are really me. In any public setting, Elena links her arm through mine and smiles with genteel grace. To outsiders we remain the model couple who clearly adore each other. Only I know it's all a performance, because Elena has kept up the habit of sleeping in a separate bed, at least before there was Laura. Although I'm not young anymore, a man still has needs. My insomnia worsened, so whenever I felt unbearable, I would replay everything countless times late at night, trying to find out exactly where I went wrong. Maybe it was from the very beginning. I underestimated Elena's endurance and guile. I thought that after returning to family life for more than a decade she'd been worn smooth, turned into harmless porcelain that only cared about our daughter's grades and afternoon tea pastries. I was wrong. She is not porcelain. She is a sword sheathed, and I was the one who gave her reason to draw it. Now that sword has gained another owner. Our daughter, Daisy, graduated from an Ivy League school with top honors and parachuted into the company. Starting from the grassroots, everyone knows this is only a transition. Elena is laying the most secure path for her heir. Daisy resembles her mother, especially those eyes that always hold a faint smile yet reveal nothing. But she has more of a young person's vitality and warmth than Elena. She will cling to my arm and act coquettish, calling me Dad sweetly and asking me about project questions. In those moments I even have the illusion, maybe I can reclaim a sliver of dignity and worth as a father through my daughter. I began to pay closer attention to her, both in work and in life. Selfishly, I told myself this was a father's care, until the day I saw my own reflection. Chapter 2. The first project Daisy took on was the company's newly developed smart home ecosystem. For the project she assembled a very young team, full of technical prodigies she'd poached from top universities and competitors. 2 of them stood out. One named Gideon, a PhD from a leading domestic university's computer science department. Gifted in algorithms, somewhat introverted and awkward. The other, Liam, was a project manager back from Silicon Valley, sunny, outgoing, excellent at resource integration and team coordination. I noticed Daisy paid special attention to both of these young men. That afternoon I passed by the pantry. Through the glass partition I saw Daisy handing a pour-over coffee to Gideon. She tilted her head, listening to Gideon's nervous report on a technical problem. Her gaze focused and gentle. Gideon, I know this model is difficult. Her voice as soft as a feather, but I believe you can get it done. Don't mind what others say. Here, you are the most special. Do you understand what I mean? Gideon's face flushed, and the dull look in his eyes exploded into an astonishing brightness. He nodded heavily, clutching his laptop like a knight who'd received a medal, and hurried away. I stood where I was, a familiar feeling surging in my chest. That look, that favoritism, that phrase, "You are the most special." It felt like someone had once said that to me. 2 days later, the company held its quarterly team-building retreat at a countryside resort. After the dinner, by the bonfire, I saw a similar scene again. Chapter 3. This time it was Liam. He looked a bit down because of an issue with a supplier. Sitting alone in a corner, Daisy carried 2 drinks over and sat beside him. "What's wrong? Feeling gloomy?" she teased in a casual tone. "Getting knocked down by a little setback?" Liam forced a smile. "Supervisor Sue, this one's on me. I didn't handle it well." "No." Daisy Sue shook her head, her gaze sincere in the flickering firelight. "You deserve the credit for how far this project has come. In my mind, no one can take your place. This team can't do without you. Neither can I." She tapped her glass against Liam's and downed it in one. Liam stared at her, stunned. The shadow over his face vanished. In its place bloomed a complicated light, gratitude mixed with admiration and some kind of affection. My heart suddenly sank. At last I understood where that familiar feeling came from. Years ago, I used the very same tactic on Laura. I would praise her abilities openly, say no one could match her. I would offer the most tender comfort when she was down, tell her how important she was to me. I made her feel like the only one. I even indulged her to be the indispensable second lady of the company, and she gladly threw herself into the fight for me, giving up her youth, like the brothel-keeping masters of Ming and Qing who took concubines, taking advantage of power and desire to control women in power. I always thought it was my clever, low-cost technique for managing subordinates. But now, seeing my daughter skillfully use the same methods, a bone-deep chill ran through me. Where did she learn it? Chapter 4. One lazy weekend afternoon, I slipped away early from a boring cocktail party and went home. The villa was quiet. The study door was ajar and I could hear Elena and Daisy talking inside. "Daisy, Gideon and Liam are both rare talents," Elena said, her voice tinged with warning. "But aren't you playing with fire doing this?" Then Daisy's clear, slightly sly laugh. "Mom, don't worry, I know my limits." She paused, then said something that struck me like a thunderbolt. "Isn't this the same trick you used on my father back then? Make them feel special, feel favored, then they'll willingly work for me and fight for the company like it's their own." Work for me. Those words stabbed my eardrums like 2 glowing hot steel rods. With a boom, a string in my mind snapped completely. All the images instantly snapped into place. Chapter 5. Elena, who sold the handbag her aunt had given her to scrape together money to pay my tuition. When I told her I would pay her back, the smile in her eyes looked touched but was actually full of understanding. Her father's relentless obstacles, and the way she seemed to cede power after we married. She stepped back into the wings, silently permitting everything between Laura and me, letting me believe I had finally broken free of constraints and gained control. And Laura, that woman I once thought I could toy with in the palm of my hand. My favoritism toward her, my promises of the future. I made her feel like a victor, exchanging that illusion for her loyalty and competence. How proud I used to be of my own craftiness. But only in this moment did I awaken to the truth. Maybe it all began when she first got involved with me. Maybe it started when my father-in-law agreed to our marriage but, through his pressure on me, forced me to give up certain terms. Maybe it began when the shares in the will were all held in trust for the daughter, on the vast chessboard constructed by Elena and her father. Laura and I were fundamentally the same kind of piece. Elena tolerated Laura's existence not out of magnanimity, nor out of weakness. She merely watched, like a master observing his most capable hunting dog while raising a puppy. As long as they brought back prey, the master never cared how they competed for favor in the den. I thought I had given Laura an illusory dream of being the company's second lady, but I didn't realize I myself was living inside a grander illusion of being a male master's prized asset, an illusion that had driven me to work diligently for the Sue family for half my life. I leaned against the cold wall and slowly slid down to the floor. The dressing mirror at the end of the corridor reflected a man in fine clothes with a ghastly pale face. That expensive suit now looked like an absurd costume. I am not Marcel. I am merely, for the Sue family, another Laura.